Today's case takes us to the quiet stretches of Central Florida, where the neighborhoods are lined with dense pine woods, sandy roads, and long, humid nights. But on the night of January 4th of 2023, something happened inside a small home in Silver Springs that shattered one family's world forever. What was first described as a tragic accident began unraveling almost immediately, conflicting reports, unexplained injuries, and a timeline that has never made sense to the people who loved her most. As we walk through the final hours of Codie's life, the inconsistencies surrounding her death, and the questions her family has been begging to have answered, please listen with caution. This episode includes brief mentions of relationship violence, which may be triggering. This is the story of Codie Novack. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. Codie Elizabeth Novack was born and raised in East Stroudsburg, Pennsylvania, and from the beginning, she was someone people remembered. Her family describes her as warm, hilarious, deeply empathetic, and stubborn in the way that only someone with a big heart can be. Codie put others first, often more than she should have. And she had this ability to see the good in almost anyone, even when they didn't deserve it. She gave people chance after chance, rebuilding bridges again and again, even when they've been burned before. And for anyone who ever saw a harsher side of her, her family says there was always more to the story, because Codie carried a lot privately, often protecting the people who hurt her. So Codie graduated high school in 2013 through the Pennsylvania Leadership Charter School. And not long after, she made a big move down to Ocala, Florida. She worked in retail for a while, but she had bigger plans. She wanted to go into forensic science. And she wasn't just focused on school or work. She was involved in her community too. She was a member of the Stroudsburg Moose Lodge since 2016. She played in the Moose Riders 9-ball tap league. And even before that, she was in Girl Scouts.
And outside of all of that, she was just fun. She loved music. She collected everything Stitch from Lilo and Stitch. She was always tinkering with her car. And she was that sibling who would stay up way too late making 3 a.m. mac and cheese with her siblings. And the beach, that was her happy place. If Codie could be anywhere, that's where she wanted to be.
Codie came from a large and loving family. She was the daughter of April Counterman and Albert Counterman, and the older sister to Debbie and AJ. She also had an adopted brother, Kevin, and his wife, Anna. She was surrounded by grandparents, godparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and a nephew she adored named KJ. Her family was big and extremely close. People close to her say that Codie lived by the word ohana, that family isn't just blood, it's love and loyalty. And Codie lived that every day. By the start of 2023, she was living in Florida, building a life, setting goals and looking ahead. She was supposed to turn 28 years old on January 13th of that year, which is what makes everything that happened so painful. She had a huge support system. She had plans and people that loved her. She wasn't someone who disappeared for long or cut off communication. So when she suddenly went missing after January 3rd, her family knew that something was wrong.
And within just a few days, everything about Codie's life and the investigation would unravel into a series of contradictions that her family has been fighting to make sense of ever since.
Right. So on January 3rd of 2023, Codie was last seen around 5:30 p.m. Home camera footage captured her leaving her family's home in Ocala with her on-again, off-again boyfriend. The two were headed toward a residence in Silver Springs, and she was supposed to come home the following morning, January 4th. She had 2 appointments scheduled, and she never missed appointments. But that morning came and went, and there was no call, no text, and no updates. For Codie, that was completely out of character. Her family immediately noticed when this happened, and as hours passed by without any calls or texts that were answered, their concern only grew. By the time January 5th came around, her family officially reported her missing and in danger. Codie had only moved to Florida a few months earlier in August. She didn't know many people outside her family. They had taken precautions because of concerns about domestic violence in her relationship, but they had no idea how severe things really were until these events unraveled. So when she didn't come home, her family immediately started checking everything they could. When they looked at her location, they were stunned. Codie's phone was located at the Marion County Sheriff's Office. So Codie's mother called the sheriff's office, gave Codie's name and her boyfriend's name, and asked whether anyone had reported her. But she was told there were no calls, no incidents or information in the system other than the BOLO, be on the lookout, reported for her earlier that day.
And that's when things became even more concerning. The family finally managed to get a hold of Codie's boyfriend, and his response was something that no parent ever should hear over the phone. He told them Codie wasn't at the sheriff's office. She was at the medical examiner's office on an autopsy table. Codie's mother asked if her daughter was dead and heard one word in response: yeah. And honestly, I don't even know what to say about this part because it's just cold and cruel. And honestly, like, they're so insensitive. This is the mother of the person you're supposed to love. It just feels disconnected and cold.
From a mother's perspective, I would just be in shock at that moment. Like, what? And what made all of this worse and even more devastating was that no law enforcement agency had contacted the family at all. No one had called them to tell them that Codie had been found or that she was deceased. They found out because they traced her phone's GPS signal and because Codie's boyfriend had finally answered the phone. So what the hell happened to Codie? It wasn't until later that Codie's family learned that it was Lewis, Codie's boyfriend, who had called 911. In that call, he told dispatchers that Codie might have hit her head and neck, went to sleep, and when he came to check on her, she was cold to the touch. 4 deputies and EMS responded, and according to early reports, the residence was initially treated as a potential crime scene. The major crimes detective and medical investigator of the county were notified. But from that moment forward, nearly everything recorded in reports, body cameras, and later autopsy notes would contradict one another.
And the 911 call itself raises a lot of questions. When Lewis said she hit her head and neck, he didn't say on what. And later, there would be nothing in that room that she could have struck her head or neck on. Because if we're actually thinking about this logically, I mean, like using our brain at all, how could Codie have hit her neck unless there was something to fall onto?
Exactly. And you can also hear other voices in the background during this call, like people talking, moving around, what sounds like dishes or objects being rearranged. So it seems like this crime scene was already doomed from the start. Everything was being tampered with, and there were other people there at the scene. And the dispatcher tried to walk Lewis through CPR, but even that was strange. For roughly 2 minutes, while being instructed to give consistent compressions, he was multitasking, talking to someone in the bedroom doorway, stopping and starting, never keeping count. And all of that is recorded on the call. And in the official transcript, while life-saving instructions were being given, deputies were also running Codie's background, her family's vehicle, and a warrant check on someone who wasn't listed anywhere in the incident report.
And this was during an active medical emergency. And it's unusual to see a warrant check happening at that moment, especially when the person they ran wasn't listed on the incident report. And when you pair that with the lack of a real investigative timeline, no witness follow-ups, no surveillance pulled, it raises questions of what information deputies were focusing on and why they weren't focusing on Codie in that moment.
Right. And everything just seems so, honestly, really disorganized and messed up from the very beginning. And keep in mind, no one in Codie's family knew that this was happening. When Codie's family eventually got access to the reports, they learned something else that was deeply unsettling. Out of everything inside that residence, out of all the potential evidence that could have helped explain what happened, the only items removed from the scene were Codie's body, her cell phone, and her Pennsylvania ID, which were all taken to the Marion County Sheriff's Office. There was no documented collection of clothing beddings, swabs, fingerprints, or any items belonging to the other people who were in the house with her. And this is despite the fact that the residence was initially considered a crime scene by the first responders. And the timeline here, it's important too. Codie's body wasn't removed right away. She was taken out of the house at around 4 a.m., 4 hours after the 911 call. And from there, she was transported about an hour away to the medical examiner's office in Leesburg, Florida.
And Codie's family, they were never notified that Codie's body was being transported. And even more devastating, the autopsy was performed without any next of kin notification at all. Not a single official reached out to tell the family that Codie had been found, that she had died, or that her body was being examined. They had to find all of that out later on their own.
Yes, it was hours later, on that afternoon on January 5th, when they got into contact with the medical examiner's office. Codie's shocked and devastated mother talked to Lewis. He sent her a picture of the medical examiner's card. So she reached out to the medical examiner's office and was hit with even more information they should have been told immediately. The medical pathologist confirmed that 911 had been called around midnight on January 4th and that EMS had already declared Codie deceased when they arrived. Her official time of death was logged at 12:17 a.m., hours earlier. The autopsy was then performed at 10:30 that same morning, 10 hours later, again, without any notification to Codie's family. She had been found at an unfamiliar residence, staying there with Lewis and 4 other individuals that Codie's family didn't know, and who, to this day, has never been explained in any detailed or transparent way. During that call with the medical examiner's office, Codie's family tried to ask every question they could. They wanted to know whether any life-saving measures had been attempted, what her condition was when she was found, and whether drugs or alcohol were involved. They were told that there would be no organ donation because of the state of her body and the time that had passed before her discovery. And beyond that, they were told that toxicology would take 6 to 8 weeks. So at this point, Codie's family had uncovered more in a single afternoon than anyone had ever told them. The timeline, the autopsy, the people she was with, the decisions that were made without them. And none of it made sense.
So by the time Codie's family finally pieced all of this together on their own, they were already overwhelmed. They had just learned that 911 was called around midnight, that EMS had declared Codie gone at the scene, and her autopsy had been completed hours before anyone even bothered to notify them. And on top of that, they still had no clear explanation of whose house she was in or who she had been with that night. After taking all of that in, the next step felt obvious. They reached out to the detective assigned to Codie's case, Detective Pinder, hoping to finally get some clarity. But that call did not go the way they expected.
Right. And honestly, the whole thing starts off suspicious. That 911 call alone raises questions. Lewis called around midnight saying Codie was cold to the touch and that she must have hit her head. But EMS didn't pronounce her dead until 12:17. If she was already cold, that means she'd been gone for hours before anyone called. And that detail isn't explained anywhere. And then there's what was happening behind closed doors. Codie's family knew she and Lewis had a history of domestic violence. Her mom, April, even said that she checked Codie's location that night because the two of them had a safety plan. They had talked through what to do if things ever felt dangerous again. That alone tells you how much fear and preparation went into keeping Codie safe. And then there's the substance use piece. Lewis drank heavily and used drugs every day. This is according to the family. But they were adamant that Codie didn't. She had clean drug tests for work, including one just a few weeks before she died. Sure, she might have had a drink socially, but nothing close to what the official story later suggested. So for April, her mother, this didn't look like an accident. But from the beginning, she was already up against a narrative that said no crime had happened at all.
And that's what really stands out here. In so many domestic violence cases, the people closest to the victim know something is wrong. They just don't always realize how bad it is until afterwards. Victims tend to minimize things, hide the worst moments, or blame themselves. And Codie's family said that she did all of that. And then you add in the fact that she and her mom actually created a safety plan. a literal safety plan for what to do if things went wrong, it makes it even harder to understand why April was dismissed so quickly.
Well, get this. The family learned that right after the incident, Lewis didn't remain in Florida to answer questions, assist the investigation, or speak with Codie's family. He left the state almost immediately and traveled back to Connecticut. And that's obviously not proof of anything criminal, but it does raise more questions. When someone leaves that quickly, before a full investigation, before toxicology, before the family has any answers, it adds to the overall concern about what was really going on here. On January 11th, Codie's family received the first official documentation about her death, and immediately they noticed something wrong. According to the medical records, Codie's death was certified on January 11th, and the certificate was formally filed on January 13th, Codie's 28th birthday. The manner of death was listed as an accident, and the cause as acute ethanol toxicity. And when it came to toxicology, those samples weren't processed locally. They were later mailed to a Pennsylvania lab, adding even more distance and delay to a timeline already full of gaps.
And this part is really alarming. The lab records show that they didn't even receive those samples until January 12th. That's the day after the medical examiner had already certified her cause and manner of death. And to me, that's a huge red flag. Toxicology is supposed to help inform the ruling, not come in after the fact.
Right, especially when the cause of death is related to the toxicology reports. And we'll talk about that more in detail later. But here's where it gets even stranger. The printed death certificate, the final document, it wasn't produced until February 3rd, weeks after the ruling had already been set. So by mid-January, the official story was already locked in. Codie's death was accidental, caused by alcohol. But the scientific results that would supposedly support that conclusion weren't even in the examiner's hands yet. For her family, this was the moment they realized the investigation wasn't just incomplete, it was heading down a path that didn't match anything they knew. On January 12th, Codie was released from the medical examiner's office to the funeral home. And when her family arrived, they weren't allowed to see her body, only see her face through a small viewing window. And that brief moment changed everything. It was the first time they saw her injuries, bruises, marks, abrasions. And in that instant, the family knew something had happened between the time that Codie left home on January 3rd and when she was found on January 5th. Something far more violent than the narrative they had been given.
And once they saw those injuries, the family called Detective Pinder right away. They wanted to meet with him in person again so they could show him what they saw, ask questions, and finally understand what investigators found at the scene. But just like before, Pinder wouldn't meet with them. He told them that everything could be handled over the phone, and he stayed dismissive, repeating his belief that Codie had overdosed or taken her own life. And meanwhile, no one from any agency ever mentioned the bruises, the marks, or the injuries all over Codie's face and body.
Which, can I just say how frustrating that would be for the family to be experiencing this? On January 13th, the family went to the house where Codie had been found, hoping to pick up her car and some of her belongings. They had arranged to meet a man who introduced himself as Charles Burns, and he said he was the homeowner. He and a woman he identified as his wife were supposed to help the family gather Codie's things. But the moment that they got there, something felt off. The conversations were short and uncomfortable. The couple seemed evasive. Their behavior was strange, and their answers were vague. They asked odd questions that immediately put the family on edge. And later, the family learned that Charles Burns may not have been his real name. There are also online claims that the actual homeowner was already deceased at the time, but we have not been able to verify that detail.
I mean, either way, though, that's really weird.
Yeah, and by January 14th, the family had reviewed enough of the documents they received to realize that something was deeply wrong. Almost every part of the investigation, from record keeping to specimen handling to timelines, it all had discrepancies. And the more that they looked at these reports, the more questions they had. The fire and rescue report noted that when EMS arrived, Codie was already deceased. The EMT described her as showing obvious rigor mortis with no level, meaning rigor mortis was well established, not just beginning. Her time of death had been recorded at 12:17 a.m.
But here's the thing about rigor mortis. It doesn't just appear the moment someone dies. It usually takes at least a couple hours to even begin, sometimes longer, and then slowly progresses through the body. So if Codie already had full rigor mortis shortly after midnight, that's not a small detail. That's a major red flag. It suggests that she may have died much earlier than the timeline we've been given. And it forces you to question everything that happened in those missing hours.
Right, and even when you look at the bruising that was described, that question becomes even louder. Codie had multiple bruises, many of them described as deep and purple. Some appeared newer and others looked older, meaning that they were inflicted at different times. There was also bruising around her neck, something that doesn't line up with a fall. And the explanation that was offered early on, that Codie had been drinking, fell, hit her head, and then went to sleep, it doesn't explain any of these injury patterns. There were also 2 cuts on her face, bruising on her cheek, and an older bruise on her forehead. Around her knees, she had bruising above, below, on, and circling her kneecaps, with one bruise above her knee shaped like a U, which her mother believed resembled a bite mark, especially given that Codie had reportedly been bitten by Lewis in the past.
And then there's defensive wounds. Codie had bruising on her knuckles and the backs of her hands and her wrists, which are all classic locations of defensive injuries. They're instinctive spots people use to shield their head and face. There were no bruising on the palms of her hands or the fronts of her hands that would indicate a fall, since people normally would put their hands out in support if they were falling. So things aren't really adding up here.
And then there were the lividity patterns that didn't make sense. So her face showed lividity or livor mortis, which is what happens when the heart stops pumping and gravity pulls the remaining blood to the lowest parts of the body, or the parts facing the ground. The skin in those areas become darker, almost purplish, while the areas facing upward stay pale. The lividity on Codie was darker on her face than on her back, suggesting that she had been face down for part of the time after her death. And later, she moved onto her back. Her right side was also noticeably darker, while her left side was pale, another sign that her body positioning had changed. But the reports couldn't agree on what position she was actually found in. One report said that she was on the bed. Another said a frog-like position on the floor. And another placed her in a different location. None of them matched. So for those of you who might not know, livor mortis usually starts forming within 30 minutes to a few hours after death, and it becomes fixed after several hours. If lividity appears on one side of the body, but the person is later found in a different position, it means that this body was probably moved. I mean, we don't know exactly what happened if someone was found face down on the floor and you go to check on them, so you flip them over. We don't know what happened, but it's just something to note.
Exactly, and wild enough, that's not even all of the strange activity that happened that night. Codie's last normal phone call activity was at 2:30 p.m. on January 4th. After that, everything becomes weird. There's a 5-hour gap with no data at all. Then, around 7 p.m., activity picks back up again. But none of it looks like Codie, according to her mother. There were uncharacteristic searches, strange banking interactions, deleted history, email changes, and unusual account activity. And this continues all the way to midnight, right before that 911 call.
And if she was pronounced dead at 12:17 a.m. and had signs of rigor mortis, it's kind of strange to think that she was doing these things on her phone. And probably the most suspicious part about this is what Codie was doing during that last normal phone activity on the afternoon of January 4th. She was in a text argument with Lewis, where he apologized to Codie for hitting her. But of course, none of this was considered as part of the investigation. Not obviously, anyway.
And shockingly, there's still more inconsistencies in this investigation.
Okay, so let's do a quick recap on what we know. Codie's family was already facing a long list of unanswered questions. EMS had pronounced her dead just after midnight, yet no one contacted her family. Her body was removed from the residence at around 4 a.m, transported an hour away to Leesburg, and the autopsy wasn't performed until 10:30 a.m. on January 5th, nearly 12 hours after she was declared deceased. And when it came to toxicology, those samples weren't processed locally. They were later mailed to a Pennsylvania lab, adding even more distance and delay of a timeline already full of gaps. And just when you think that the family dealt with enough, they were hit with another blow. By February 7th, barely a month after Codie died, the family learned that at Detective Pinder's request, Codie's case had been officially closed. The ruling of accident and ethanol toxicity was accepted without question. This happened despite the fact that reports, autopsy findings, scene descriptions, and the injuries on Codie's body did not align with each other. By May 4th, 4 months after Codie's death, her family was still begging for basic answers. They had repeatedly asked for x-rays and additional lab testing, things that, should have been standard in a case involving unexplained injuries, conflicting reports, and an unclear timeline. Only after they contacted outside services did the medical examiner's office retrieve Codie's body from the funeral home to perform the x-rays and test vitreous fluid. Even then, the testing wasn't done to explore other possible causes. It was only performed to reinforce the ethanol level that had already been used to classify her death as an accident.
Vitreous fluid is something you'll see mentioned a lot in forensic toxicology. And honestly, it's tough to ignore the irony here. Codie wanted to go into forensic science, so walking through this feels like a strange, heartbreaking tribute to the path that she one day hoped to take. Inside each eye is a clear substance called vitreous humor, which helps the eye keep its shape. Because it's sealed inside the eye, it's protected from contamination in a way that blood sometimes isn't. It makes it a more stable and reliable sample for toxicology testing.
When it's tested, it's usually to confirm or compare alcohol levels, check electrolytes, identify drugs or toxins, and determine whether post-mortem changes could be affecting blood results. So even though this testing allegedly confirmed the conclusion of ethanol toxicity, we later learned from April that there is more to the story, and then things became even stranger. When the family finally received the X-ray files by email, the files were incomplete, misidentified, mislabeled, and missing key images you would expect in a trauma-related autopsy. We don't have access to these reports, but according to Codie's mom, April, who does have them, the documentation is full of inconsistencies. And April questioned the authenticity of the files immediately because details didn't match Codie's known medical history or physical characteristics. In forensic work, mislabeling or sending incomplete scans, if that's what happened, is a major breach in procedure. You can't rely on them to rule anything out, which is exactly why families in cases like this push so hard for second opinions. For Codie's family, this was another movement where trust in the investigation eroded even further. At this point, it seems like April didn't know where else to turn, so she decided to go public with this information. On May 17th of 2023, April wrote on Facebook that she has been more lost than she had ever been. Things hadn't been getting easier, and she was getting more questions than answers. Every day was harder for her, and all she wanted was answers. April wrote about the guilt she felt for not knowing the full extent of the domestic violence Codie had been experiencing. She said that through saved messages, photos, and calls, she learned that Lewis had disrespected, hit, strangled, and assaulted Codie on many occasions. Codie had hidden it well, blaming herself, making excuses, and avoiding the people who might have seen the signs.
We've talked a lot about the dangers of strangulation in other cases like Libby Caswell. It's such a huge red flag.
Right. April went on to say that Lewis questioned Codie's loyalty, while Codie gave him more loyalty than she ever gave herself. April wrote that Lewis told her her daughter had died with no emotion, no remorse, and no explanation. Law enforcement said they could not investigate, that the medical examiner could not state how long Codie laid there with 4 to 6 other people in the house, who said that they saw, heard, and knew nothing, with bruises, cuts, abrasions, and bite marks littering her body. She said, "Now I am starting to understand your feeling when you said many times no one is listening." And she referenced Codie's final text message to Lewis. "You aren't sorry for shit. I mean, everything April wrote lines up with a pattern we see in domestic violence cases. Victims hide the worst of it. They blame themselves. They think they can fix the person. They want to believe the good moments mean something. And abusers isolate their partners, making sure the people who might intervene aren't around to see what's actually happening. So when April wrote that Codie believed she could change him, that she could make him better, it's such a red flag.
April's letter went on to describe the emotional and physical signs of what Codie endured, and that realization that her daughter had been isolated, controlled, and mistreated, even as she tried to help Lewis become a better person. She warned others who may be in similar situations to pay attention to the red flags, to seek help, to leave, to understand that love does not hurt or leave bruises. But that didn't do anything to move the case forward. But Codie's family continued fighting. They were adamant that Codie wasn't given a fair or full investigation. So on August 1st, 2023, the Marion County Sheriff's Office sent April a letter. It said that they had met to discuss the death of Codie. They commended April for sending them emails with documentation and research about her case, saying, "I have reviewed the complaint, the documents you sent me, the police report, the medical examiner's report, and the amended report, the crime scene photographs, and I met with the detective who investigated the incident. In the 6-page document you sent me, you list several things that, as you state, in my opinion, are missing from the investigation. Many of these questions you have answered on your own." They went on to say that the facts of Codie's case cannot be disputed, but they recognized that Codie passed some time before the pronounced time of death. The letter also stated that the investigation revealed that Codie drank often, and at times to excess, since they found cans of alcohol in the room where she died. They said they don't have the compelling evidence to reopen the case or to pursue any charges against Codie's boyfriend.
So her entire life is summed up by where she was found. Also, I find it interesting that they chose to highlight the length of the document that April sent, almost making it seem like it was an inconvenience to read it. But, I mean, that's just an opinion. So months passed by with a closed case that April couldn't believe. On August 23rd, 2023, 8 months after Codie's death, the family learned of a disturbing development involving Lewis. He had been arrested in Cheshire, Connecticut, in connection with an incident involving another woman. According to the arrest records, the charges included strangulation or suffocation in the 2nd degree, assault in the 3rd degree, including bite marks, and disorderly conduct. This is according to what April has shared. So, if what April is alleging happened to Codie is true, it's definitely part of a pattern. And as we've talked about in other cases, strangulation is recognized as one of the strongest predictors of escalating violence in intimate partner relationships. That would deepen my fear that something violent happened to Codie, not to mention that bite marks were included in the arrest report. By October of 2023, Codie's mother had spent months trying to understand how her daughter's death could be ruled an alcohol accident when so many elements didn't make sense. During her research, she shared 2 scientific articles on her Facebook page. Both of these articles discuss how ethanol, the same chemical measured in blood alcohol testing, can be naturally produced inside the body, especially after death under certain conditions.
The first article explains that when bacteria and yeast start breaking down tissues after death, they can generate ethanol internally. That means that the longer a body sits before samples are collected, the higher the alcohol concentration can appear, even if a person didn't drink enough to cause death. So, in delayed autopsies, elevated ethanol levels should be interpreted carefully since decomposition can inflate those numbers.
And the second article she shared describes autobrewery syndrome, which is a rare condition where the body converts carbohydrates into alcohol internally. It's not common, but the research shows that ethanol levels might not always reflect consumption. And let's go back to the part where we were talking about vitreous fluid testing. So in Codie's case, the vitreous fluid test was done only to confirm ethanol, not to rule out other causes. But vitreous fluid is not isolated from the rest of the body. After death, the body begins breaking down. Tissues start leaking fluids, bacteria migrates, and alcohol produced elsewhere in the body can diffuse into the eye. So, vitreous fluid can still absorb ethanol created during decomposition, just more slowly and less dramatically than blood.
So in Codie's case, the timeline is extremely important. She was declared dead at 12:17 a.m., and police have confirmed that she definitely died sometime before that, with a lot of researchers and onlookers with experience noting that the death was likely 10 p.m. or earlier. The body was removed at 4 a.m., transported an hour, and the autopsy was at 10:30 a.m., more than 12 hours after Codie is believed to have died. And on top of that, the vitreous testing wasn't done until the medical examiner retrieved the body again weeks later.
I mean, that's a long window for bacterial growth, decomposition, temperature changes, and tissue permeability breakdown that could have absorbed ethanol formation. Forensic literature says that after roughly 12 to 24 hours, vitreous chemistry begins to drift, and postmortem ethanol production can influence results. So, because the vitreous fluid was only tested, according to April, to confirm Codie's alcohol levels and to not explore other options or anything like that, April and Codie's family felt slighted again by the system when investigating Codie's passing. I'm sure it felt like a confirmation bias. Codie's death was certified before toxicology was complete. Vitreous testing was done after the family pushed, and it was only used to reinforce a conclusion already made. So even a better sample becomes fallible if the testing wasn't done correctly. In this Facebook post with the articles on ethanol levels following death, April also posted an email she received, but the sender is not present in the post. The email says that they have received April's email concerning the death investigation of Codie, and that the Medical Examiner's Commission only has jurisdiction to perform an administrative review of physician pathologists in light of potential violation of practice guidelines for Florida medical examiners. The email also says that the Medical Examiner's Commission does not have the authority to answer questions or concerns regarding the internal policy, procedures, or personnel, and there are no ultimate facts that show a violation of Florida statutes, administrative code, or practice guidelines, and they could not compel anyone or change a cause of manner of death.
So we can assume that this came from the Medical Examiner's Commission in response to a complaint from April Counterman. And unfortunately, it looks like she reached a dead end here too.
Yep, a dead end. And around this time, April shared another forensic article that directly addressed the problems she believed existed in Codie's case. It explains how handling, storage, delays, and collection methods can dramatically change the reported alcohol level in a patient. So what April was trying to show, I think, by sharing this article, is that Codie's alcohol level shouldn't have been taken at face value, not with the delayed autopsy, the transport time, the decomposition window, the inconsistent documentation, or the fact that her death was certified before toxicology was even completed. But it didn't seem like this was getting her anywhere in changing the findings of Codie's case. April continued to speak out and add new information to what she'd experienced with the law enforcement systems as she was trying to advocate for her daughter. She publicly shared how, when she questioned law enforcement about Codie's time of death, she was told that those were TV answers, which, in my opinion, is insinuating that her questions about this were invalid.
And I find that really strange since time of death is often a very important piece of investigation. So to say or imply that it doesn't matter, that's so weird.
Right, and just like we've seen in other cases, while Codie's case was sitting still, Lewis's record kept getting longer. According to the documents April found, only a few months after his arrest in August of 2023, the family discovered yet another incident involving Lewis. This time, he was accused of violating a protective order involving a different woman. By January of 2024, as Codie's family kept digging through public records, they realized that Lewis didn't have just a couple past issues. He had more than 20 reports or incidents tied to him across Florida, Pennsylvania, and Connecticut. And April had the paperwork to back it up. She even shared the docket numbers publicly so anyone can look it up for themselves. it wasn't just Lewis either. Several of the people who were at the house where Codie was found had their own concerning histories. The kind that, in her family's eyes, should have triggered a much deeper investigation into how Codie really died. But according to them, the Marion County Sheriff's Office wouldn't look into any of it or any of the other evidence the family tried to bring forward. With the criminal case going nowhere, the only option left for Codie's family was civil court. They filed a claim against Lewis for the damage done to her vehicle and 2 personal items they say were destroyed or flushed during the events leading up to her death. Lewis asked for an additional hearing on the civil matter, but then he didn't show up. So, at least in that small way, the family got a win. The judge issued a default judgment in their favor. Over the next few months, Codie's mother kept pushing for answers. But in March of 2024, she received an email from the attorney representing the 5th District Medical Examiner's Office. The attorney said they had advised their clients not to meet with April anymore about the autopsy. They ended the message by saying that autopsies aren't something for advocacy, but rather something based strictly on science and objective findings.
Which is not helpful when April and a lot of other people believe that the findings are not objective. But whatever, I'll stop there. In July of 2024, over a year and a half after Codie's death, April shared another public message. April said that Codie had been let down by both the legal system and the law enforcement agencies responsible for investigating her death. She called out the Marion County Sheriff's Office and the medical examiner who classified Codie's death as an accident, saying that the decision was made too quickly without reviewing critical evidence or medical history. She noted the mislabeled records, misidentified x-rays, contradictory scene reports, inconsistent timelines, and injuries that have never been explained. Those are fundamental problems. She wrote that both the medical examiner and the investigator had declined to discuss the evidence with her. She said that when professionals fail to exercise due diligence, it enables wrongdoers to evade justice and permits individuals to inflict harm to escape responsibility.
And we have seen this in other investigations too. When agencies stop communicating, families lose confidence in the findings. It does not automatically mean foul play happened, but it does mean the investigation was not thorough or documented well enough to rule out other possibilities. For April, it wasn't about just her daughter. It became about protecting other families from going through this same kind of thing. One of the most impactful parts of her Facebook post was how clearly she laid out the inconsistencies in the reports. She pointed out that radiology was missing images of the neck, the right shoulder, the upper chest, the collarbone, and several other areas. Some of the images that did exist were mislabeled. An elbow was labeled as a shoulder, and the chest was labeled as the abdomen. The reports also listed the wrong age for Codie, and past injuries were not included at all. Anyone trying to understand their child's death would see these issues as serious red flags. And April kept reaching out to both the sheriff's office and the medical examiner's office, but she continued to be denied more information. And from that point, April committed herself to keeping her daughter's story and other families' stories alive through her Justice for Codie Novack Facebook page. She began sharing awareness for multiple cases that still needed answers, including Codie's. And by April of 2025, families across the community were speaking out and sharing their own experiences. Many talked about missing loved ones, questionable deaths, and cases they believed had never been properly investigated. April explained that she had created a list of these cases based on information from families, public forums, social media, and community groups, even though many of the cases had never been covered by local news or reached a wider audience.
April's post urged the community to raise awareness for all of the families who were missing answers. She wrote that each one of them is significant and deserves more.
And she continued to advocate. In July of 2025, she shared an article from the Ocala Gazette about a Marion County Sheriff's Office deputy who said he was retaliated against for speaking out about racial misconduct and broken processes inside the agency. April wrote that she believed and supported the deputy. saying her family had experienced many of the same systematic failures. With that post, she laid out the full story of what she says happened during Codie's investigation, including the mistakes, the missteps, and the refusal to take her daughter's death seriously. She explained that it was not until they saw Codie's body at the funeral home that they discovered the marks and bruises that were never mentioned in any official report. Nothing they saw matched what investigators had told them. April questioned why Codie's injuries were not photographed, measured, or documented correctly.
She also said that when they finally demanded an in-person meeting with the detective, they came with GPS data, text messages showing altercations, images of Codie's damaged vehicle, and a recent employment drug test, and records of the individuals in the house. And they also sent emails with further evidence, but those emails went unanswered.
And April said that when her family requested every record they were entitled to, including medical files, investigative documents, 911 calls, EMS reports, and body camera footage, what they received was incomplete or inconsistent. She described records that were misrepresented, contradictory, revised or edited, mislabeled, or missing important information. Some body camera footage was missing entirely, and she pointed out moments where cameras were turned off or edited out by officers, according to her. Through these records and videos, she said she learned that from the very beginning, the narrative was framed as an overdose, and that this had been communicated through medical personnel during the emergency call before any true investigation even started. April also said that she and her family gathered additional information on their own, including phone records, social media messages, photographs, witness statements, and records from outside agencies. They worked with private investigators. They reached out to supervisors, the mayor, county commissioners, state representatives, the governor's office, and even the FBI, since Lewis had domestic violence incidents in 3 different states. It took more than 18 months before they were finally given a meeting with Sheriff William Woods. And when that meeting happened, April said that they came prepared with a full tote of documentation. But instead of progress, they were met with victim blaming, a dismissal of Codie's injuries, and a refusal to move the case forward. She said the sheriff blamed her for what happened and told them that there was nothing they could do. The family filed 3 internal affairs complaints after that, but they were told there would be no investigation and that the case would remain closed.
When questioning the injuries, April said the medical examiner verbally called them blunt force trauma, but did not write that in the report. She also said the medical examiner admitted she was unfamiliar with some of Codie's known medical conditions, including a traumatic brain injury, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and gastric bypass. April wrote that when they questioned the discrepancy between the alcohol levels and the lack of injury evaluation, the medical examiner became upset and said Codie was drunk and asphyxiated herself.
But according to April, that statement does not appear anywhere in the official report. She ended her post by saying that this is not only about Codie's case, but about what she believes is a larger problem with Marion County. The whistleblower deputy she referenced later filed a federal lawsuit claiming that he was unjustly retaliated against and even arrested after reporting racism and being pressured to falsify police reports. 18 of the 20 criminal charges filed against Marion County deputies were eventually dismissed or dropped. The lawsuit alleged that the agency suppressed unfavorable information and intimidated or threatened anyone who tried to speak up. A second article by Ocala News, they featured Sheriff Billy Woods, the same sheriff April described meeting with in her post. He denied all of the allegations, calling them unsupported and legally insufficient. The Marion County Sheriff's Office stated that there was no evidence of misconduct within the department and no proven pattern of retaliation, falsified reports, or suppression of the truth. But these are not the only negative allegations connected to the agency. In July of 2025, April shared another story. This one involved a Vietnam veteran who died while in the custody of the Marion County Sheriff's Office, and whose family had filed a lawsuit for negligence and wrongful death. According to that lawsuit, 72-year-old Army veteran Stephen Smith Sr. died in the Marion County Jail in 2023 after deputies allegedly refused to provide him medical attention.
It's really sad because the lawsuit alleges that Smith had repeatedly begged for help, telling detention officers that he couldn't walk, couldn't breathe, and that something was seriously wrong. Deputies reportedly ignored those pleas and mocked him. The suit claims he was dragged, placed in a restraint chair, and left there until he became unresponsive, dying shortly after.
Yes, the death certificate listed the cause as probable cardiac arrhythmia. But his family, like many others in the county, believe that the real issue was neglect, a lack of accountability, and a sheriff's office that operated with what they described as deliberate indifference. And April's Facebook page is filled with comments from people who say that they experienced situations similar to Codie's and Stephen Smith's. Today, more than 2 years after Codie Novack's death, her case is still officially closed. The Marion County Sheriff's Office has not reopened the investigation, and the medical examiner's ruling of accident from acute ethanol toxicity remains unchanged, leaving Lewis a free man. The family's repeated requests for a re-examination, for unedited body camera footage, for corrected medical records, and for basic clarification have all been denied or ignored. And they still feel like that they're fighting this battle alone. They believe someone saw or heard something, and they believe this case should not be left where it is. If you know anything about the circumstances surrounding Codie's death, her family is pleading for you to come forward. Even the smallest detail could matter. Tips can be submitted to the Marion County Crime Stoppers at 352-368-7867.
And April is constantly posting on the Justice for Codie Novack Facebook page, where she has bravely shared and relentlessly talked about what she's gone through with her daughter's case. So we encourage you to check that out for updates as well.
And I would like to take a moment here to remind you, if you or someone you know is in an abusive relationship, or you feel unsafe where you are, please reach out to help in whatever way is safest for you. If you can't safely use your phone or your personal computer, you can visit a public place like a local library and use one of their computers to connect with someone privately. You can also reach out through the Domestic Violence Hotline website at thehotline.org, where you can chat with an advocate and start building a safety plan. Your safety plan and your life matter. And we'll be sure to include the resources in our show notes. And thank you all so much for listening. If you would like to support our show and grab some Crime Salad merch, you can visit crimesaladpodcast.dashery.com. Link will be in the description. And a huge thank you to all of our Patreon members. We love you so much. And also our Apple Plus subscribers. You guys are amazing. You really help keep the show going. We appreciate you so much. Thanks so much for subscribing, sharing our show. It means the world to us. And one more thing. Please love yourself. Take care of yourself. We will see you next week.